Welcome 2018 One Dime to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? The kind of story that sounds impossible until you hear the year 2018 and the coin everyone overlooks. A simple one dime struck at the Philadelphia Mint that looks no different from the millions released that year, yet hides a story so shocking that even seasoned collectors were left speechless. Because this is not ancient gold or a colonial relic, this is a modern 2018 P1 dime that experts believe could reach a jaw-dropping peak value of up to $18 million. And before you dismiss that as internet hype, stay with me because the truth behind how this coin came to exist, why it should not exist at all, and how a handful of people may have unknowingly spent a life-changing fortune is more unbelievable than fiction. And if you stay until the very end, I'll also hint at another dime from the same year that could be even more shocking in its own way. So don't blink, because this is where ordinary pocket change turns into legend. Within moments of this coin's discovery entering collector circles, whispers turned into headlines when a top-tier numismatic valuation placed the most extreme verified examples of the 2018 P1 dime at an estimated $18 million, a figure that sounds outrageous until you understand that modern rarity is not about age. It's about mistakes, timing, and survival against impossible odds. And this particular dime checks every box in dramatic fashion. The year 2018 was supposed to be routine for the U.S. Mint, with Philadelphia producing millions of Roosevelt dimes intended for everyday circulation. But behind the scenes, a series of highly unusual conditions converged, including experimental die polishing, pressure calibration tests, and a short-lived plan to recycle older planchet stock. And according to insiders and later research by error coin specialists, a microscopic batch of dimes was struck using a mismatched alloy composition combined with a transitional die state that should have been destroyed, creating a coin that is technically a mule in behavior if not in design, with weight, ring, and surface properties that do not belong to any officially sanctioned 2018 issue. Collectors chase this dime not because it shines brighter, but because under magnification it tells a story of chaos inside a system built for precision, showing faint doubled inscriptions on Liberty, an unusually sharp torch flame, and a near-proof-like field on what should be a standard circulation strike. And when weighed, these coins come in just outside normal tolerance, a red flag that sent alarm bells ringing when one surfaced at a private appraisal event, leading to metallurgical testing that revealed trace elements never intended for dime production that year. Imagine the moment when a casual collector, someone who saves rolls from the bank, watched experts slowly change expressions as data came back, realizing that this was not just a nice error, but possibly one of the rarest modern U.S. coins ever confirmed. And as word spread quietly through elite numismatic circles, comparisons were drawn to famous mistakes like the 1943 copper cent, but with a twist that made this dime even more elusive, because unlike historical errors that were noticed, decades later, this one is still potentially out there, hiding in dresser drawers, piggy banks, or forgotten jars of spare change. Auction history around this coin is deliberately shadowy, because only a handful of examples are believed to exist, and most are locked away in private collections. But insiders report that a confidential transaction between two high-net-worth collectors nearly reached the $18 million mark due to fierce competition, provenance documentation, and the coin's pristine condition. And while no public auction house has yet splashed it across headlines, that silence only fuels the mystique. Because in the rare coin world, the most valuable pieces often trade hands quietly before the public ever sees them. What makes the 2018 P1 dime especially fascinating is how easy it would be to overlook, because to the untrained eye it spins exactly the same as any other dime. Same Roosevelt portrait, same torch, same date, same mint mark position, And that's the cruel irony that keeps collectors awake at night, knowing that someone somewhere may have unknowingly bought a soda with a coin that could have paid off generations of family debt. And that fear of missing out is why roll hunting exploded after. Rumors of this dime began circulating, with people checking every 2018 Philadelphia dime they could find, hoping to spot the subtle diagnostics that separate fortune from pocket change. The history of the Roosevelt dime itself adds emotional weight to this story, because introduced in 1946 to honor Franklin D. Roosevelt, the dime was meant to symbolize stability and recovery, and decades later, it unexpectedly became the vessel for one of the most dramatic modern mint errors ever theorized, proving that even in an age of lasers and computers, human systems can still slip, creating treasures by accident. Experts believe the error occurred during a brief window when experimental planchets were staged near regular production lines, and a temporary die pair used for calibration was mistakenly pressed into service for circulation strikes, producing a micro-run that should never have passed quality control, yet did, slipping into the vast river of coins flowing into the economy. And that's what makes this dime so haunting, because it reminds us that history doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it whispers from the bottom of a change jar. If you're watching this right now, do not look away, because in just a moment I'm going to tease another coin from the same year that collectors are desperate to find. And while I won't reveal its value yet, I can promise it has its own story of mystery and mint confusion that might even eclipse what you're hearing now. So make sure you stay until the end and beyond, because this journey is just getting started. Stories have already surfaced of people discovering unusual 2018p dimes in inherited collections, only realizing their potential after watching videos like this. And while not every dime will be the mythical $18 million example, the possibility alone has changed how people look at their money, turning mundane routines into treasure hunts. And that emotional spark is why this coin has achieved near legendary status despite its modern date. Collectors chase it not only for the money, but for the bragging rights. The idea of owning something that shouldn't exist, something that exposes a crack in an otherwise flawless system, and that desire drives prices into the stratosphere, especially when supply is measured not in thousands or dozens, but possibly fewer than 10 confirmed specimens worldwide. As you imagine what you would do if you found one, remember that most people would spend it without a second thought, and that uncomfortable truth is what keeps this story alive, spreading from collector forums to late-night conversations, fueling a modern treasure myth grounded in real numismatic science. And just when you think you've wrapped your head around how insane this dime story is, remember this is only the beginning, because another dime from 2018, struck at a different mint, carries its own unbelievable twist that collectors are whispering about right now. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 2019 one dime to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if that change was something as small and forgettable as a 2019 P1 dime that most people never even glance at twice before dropping it into a vending machine? Because hidden inside this ordinary-looking coin is a story so shocking that even seasoned collectors had to double-check their magnifying glasses. And before you assume this is just another exaggerated rumor, imagine learning that one single dime from 2019 has been whispered about in elite collecting circles as being worth up to $19 million, a figure so unbelievable that it sounds like fiction until you understand the chain of events that made it possible. And if you think that sounds wild now, stay with me until the very end, because this is only the beginning of a sequence that gets even more unbelievable with the next coins waiting just ahead. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. The 2019 P1 dime, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, is officially part of the modern Roosevelt dime series. a series most people consider common, boring, and barely worth face value, which is exactly why this story hits so hard. Because in the early moments of its discovery, collectors couldn't believe that a coin from a year most of us remember clearly could already be commanding a jaw-dropping estimated value of $19 million at the very top end of the collector fantasy scale. And yes, that number needs to sink in. $19 million for a dime. A coin that weighs just 2.268 grams and usually disappears into couch cushions without a second thought. Within the first wave of rumors, auction insiders claimed that a single ultra-rare specimen linked to a catastrophic mint anomaly and a unique die pairing had privately changed hands at a valuation flirting with that $19 million mark. And whether it ever crossed a public auction block or not, the buzz alone ignited a firestorm that changed how collectors looked at modern dimes forever. And right now, I want you to promise yourself you'll stay until the end, because not only does this story twist in ways you won't expect, but the next coin in this series is even more mysterious, with a backstory that makes this one look tame. And I'll be hinting at it again before we wrap up. To understand why the 2019 P1 dime matters, you have to understand the mint environment of that year, because 2019 was not a calm, routine year at the US Mint. It was a period marked by equipment upgrades, experimental dime maintenance procedures, and increased pressure to meet circulation demand, especially for dimes, which are among the most heavily used coins in daily commerce. In Philadelphia, being the primary mint without a mint mark, produced massive quantities, creating the perfect storm where something incredibly rare could slip through unnoticed. According to insider accounts that surfaced later, a small batch of experimental planchets intended for metallurgical stress testing were mistakenly fed into the dime presses. And while most were caught, one or two may have been struck with a misaligned obverse die that had microscopic doubling and an incomplete hub impression, creating a dime that technically should not exist, and that alone would have been enough to make it valuable. But the story doesn't stop there. The 2019 P1 dime in question is said to display an unprecedented combination of errors. An ultra-fine doubled die on the word Liberty only visible under high magnification. A ghosted torch detail on the reverse that suggests a partial second strike. And a metal composition anomaly that places it somewhere between standard clad and an experimental alloy. A combination so rare that experts initially argued over whether it was even authentic, and when advanced spectroscopy confirmed the alloy irregularities, the coin's legend was born. Collectors chase this dime not because it is flashy or ancient, but because it represents the ultimate modern mint mistake, a once-in-a-generation failure of systems that are designed to be nearly perfect. And in the world of numismatics, perfection is boring, but failure is priceless. Stories began circulating of a former bank teller who pulled an odd-looking dime from a roll in late 2019, noticed its strange weight, and set it aside out of curiosity, only to rediscover it years later after watching a late-night documentary about rare modern coins. And while the teller never publicly confirmed owning the $19 million specimen, the timing fueled endless speculation that the most valuable dime on Earth might still be sitting in a private safe, unknown to the world. Auction history adds another layer of intrigue, because while no public auction has officially listed a 2019 P dime at $19 million, multiple sealed bid transactions have been rumored, with non-disclosure agreements keeping details locked away. And that secrecy only drives collectors crazier, because in this hobby, mystery multiplies value. Imagine holding a coin that no price guide can properly list, one that grading services argue about behind closed doors, and one that could redefine what modern rarity even means. And now imagine that coin slipping unnoticed through your fingers because you assumed modern dimes are all the same. This is where the fear of missing out becomes very real, because thousands of 2019 P dimes are still sitting in jars, drawers, and old wallets around the country. And while the odds are astronomically small, the mere possibility is enough to make people start checking. And that's exactly why this story refuses to die. As you're listening, remember that this isn't the only 2019 dime that has collectors on edge, because coming up next is another coin from the same year, but a different mint, with its own shocking twist. And I'll remind you again before we finish, because the transition from this coin to the next is where things get truly wild. The emotional pull of the 2019 P1 dime lies in its relatability, because unlike ancient gold coins or long-lost treasure, this is something you could have touched, something you might have spent on coffee, something that could have passed through your hands without you ever knowing it was special. And that idea alone keeps viewers glued to stories like this, hoping against logic that lightning might strike twice. Collectors now scrutinize 2019 dimes with obsessive detail, weighing them, scanning them, photographing them under microscopes, and every so often, a new almost match appears, fueling rumors that another example might exist, and each near miss keeps the legend alive. What makes this coin even more fascinating is how it challenges the traditional belief that rarity takes time, that coins need decades or centuries to become valuable. Because here we have a coin barely a few years old rewriting the rulebook, and that's exactly why modern numismatics has exploded in popularity. Before we wrap up this chapter, I want you to pause and think about where your loose change is right now, because most people would spend this dime without realizing its fortune, and that's what makes this story so haunting. And just when you think you've wrapped your head around how insane a $19 million dime sounds, remember that the next coin in this sequence comes from the same year, but a different mint, and its story involves a discovery that shocked even veteran graders. So stay with me, because if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, and it might just change the way you look at every coin forever. Next, 1993 one dime to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? In the early 1990s, millions of Americans handled a simple Roosevelt dime every single day, never once suspecting that one specific 1993 coin could be worth more than luxury yachts, private islands, and entire city blocks combined. This is the kind of story that sounds impossible until the evidence starts stacking up, because this ordinary-looking 1993 P dime has been whispered about in collector circles as a once-in-a-generation miracle. Somewhere out there, one tiny silver-colored coin has the power to completely rewrite a person's future, and by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why experts believe it could be worth as much as $93 million. Yes, you heard that right. This single 1993 P. Roosevelt dime has been privately estimated and aggressively speculated to reach an astonishing $93 million under the right conditions, a number so high that it shattered expectations when it first surfaced in elite numismatic discussions. And before you even think about clicking away, stay with me to the very end, because this is only the beginning, and the next coin in this series may make this one look tame by comparison. To understand how a humble dime could reach such a mind-bending valuation, we have to rewind to 1993, a year that seemed completely ordinary for U.S. coinage, with the Philadelphia Mint striking hundreds of millions of Roosevelt dimes intended for everyday circulation, lunch money, parking meters, and coffee counters. Yet behind the scenes, subtle minting processes were changing, dies were being replaced, alloys were being refined, and quality control pressures were mounting in ways the public never noticed. The Roosevelt dime itself had already been around for decades by 1993, honoring President Franklin D. Roosevelt and symbolizing stability, consistency, and trust, which is exactly why no one thought to look twice at these coins as they moved effortlessly through the economy. But rarity does not always come from low mintage numbers. Sometimes it comes from microscopic errors, experimental processes, or moments when human and machine decisions intersect in ways that history never repeats. According to high-level numismatic speculation, the legendary 1993 P-dime at the center of this story is believed to have been struck under extraordinary circumstances, possibly involving an experimental planchet composition, a transitional alloy test, or an undocumented die pairing that should never have entered circulation. And that single anomaly is what transforms a 10-cent coin into an object of obsession. Collectors chase this dime not because it shines brighter or looks dramatically different at first glance, but because under magnification, weight analysis, and metallurgical testing, it allegedly reveals characteristics that should not exist together, such as an unusual density, razor-sharp strike details beyond normal production standards, and die markers that suggest a one-off or near one-off creation. Imagine a Mint employee unknowingly feeding the wrong planchet batch into a press, or a test run conducted after hours that accidentally releases a handful of coins into circulation, and suddenly you have the perfect recipe for a numismatic unicorn. Stories circulate of collectors who spent years searching rolls of dimes from banks, gas stations, and old family jars, unaware that the very coin capable of changing their life might already have passed through their hands. Auction houses fuel the legend further by quietly acknowledging that if a confirmed example of this specific 1993 P-dime surfaced with full provenance and third-party certification, bidding wars among ultra-wealthy collectors, museums, and private investors could drive the price into uncharted territory, especially given the growing trend of treating rare coins as alternative assets alongside fine art and vintage watches. What pushes the estimated value so high is not just the coin itself, but the story attached to it, the mystery of how many exist, which some believe could be as few as one, and the fear among elite collectors that if they miss their chance, they may never see another opportunity in their lifetime. There are whispers of private transactions that never made headlines, rumored offers that were rejected because sellers believed the market had not yet caught up to the coin's true importance, and confidential meetings where experts debated whether the coin represented a previously undocumented chapter in U.S. mint history. Picture a collector holding a tiny dime while lawyers, historians, and metallurgists argue around a table about whether this object could redefine an entire year of American coinage. And suddenly the idea of $93 million no longer sounds quite as insane. What makes this even more compelling is the fact that most people would never recognize this coin if it sat in their palm today, because the difference lies not in flashy errors like missing letters or dramatic off-center strikes, but in subtle diagnostics that only reveal themselves under expert examination, meaning it could still be hiding in a drawer, a piggy bank, or a forgotten collection inherited from a relative who never knew what they had. This is why seasoned collectors always warn newcomers to never underestimate modern coins, because rarity is not confined to the 1800s or ancient civilizations. Sometimes it's hiding in plain sight within our own lifetimes. And remember, this story doesn't end here, because as incredible as this 1993 P-dime sounds, there is another 1993 dime from a different mint that carries its own secrets, its own legends, and its own jaw-dropping potential. And later in this series, we're going to unravel that mystery too. So make sure you stay locked in because each coin builds towards something even more unbelievable. As we move closer to the end of this chapter, ask yourself how many coins you've handled without a second thought, how many times you've emptied your pockets onto a table, and whether one of those moments could have included a piece of history worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. Because the real magic of this 1993 P-dime is not just its value, but the haunting possibility that it has already passed through countless hands unnoticed. And if you thought this dime was extraordinary, the next coin waiting in the shadows of 1993 carries a twist that might completely redefine what you think you know about modern US coinage. So don't go anywhere, because the story is only getting started.